This afternoon, to kind of wrap everything up, unless you're staying for Debbie Berlinstein's class, which I'll talk about in a little bit, we are going to finish up with a panel this afternoon of some of our research deans from here at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. First of all, the first person to speak will be Dr. Kurt Sibben, who is the Associate Dean for Research, the Director of Center for Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine, and Professor of Pediatrics at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Followed by Dr. Donna Harrington, who is Professor and PhD Program Director at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. And finally, Dr. Barbara Smith, Associate Dean for Research and Professor of Family and Community Health at the University of Maryland School of Nursing. And just because I had a question about it, so I thought it was important for me to mention, we are taping this today, and the presentation will be available on our website tomorrow, and we are going to probably, if you come to the HCHL website, have it clickable or accessible through a banner that will be on the top of the page. So if you want to see it again, and it'll be there, jokes and all. That's jokes. And of course, Yvette, Dr. Seeger is joining us on the panel as well, so it'll be an opportunity for you. We've asked each of the panelists to kind of give us just a couple sentences regarding some of their challenges or what they heard this morning. So we'll start with Dr. Sibben and move down the panel. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to be real quick, and given that we're being taped, I'll try not to be inflammatory, but to be stimulating. And so, why am I here? And I guess I'm here because as I transitioned to a new job as a research dean, I was struck by how much money talks and how much the evaluation of where the school is going, how well my school is doing, where it ranks with other schools, had to do with how many grants X school, X department, X person had, how many grant dollars, what kinds of grants. But mostly it was money driven. And then as I got into other discussions where investments were requested, the decisions were then again based on money. And I was quickly saying, well, I was taught a long time ago, as you all have probably heard me say, because I love to say this, that grants are really rewards, not awards. And if I take the list of grants which I've applied for, which I've gotten, when I realized that in my writing and communicated that I'm asking this as a reward for what I've just done here and published, I get those grants. And every time I forget that, I don't get the grant because I'm talking about the potential. So in that, so if that is true, then I playfully respond to that in the way of being stimulated that, okay, but you're looking back at impact. And that's fine, a professorial promotion committee or something might want to look back only, but even there, the dean would say, but is this all the person's ever going to do? What's the potential looking forward, and where should we invest, in whom shall we invest, in what areas shall we invest? And so I come back to impact, and if impact isn't money, well, maybe papers is an impact because that's what's going to generate the money. But what do we want that impact to really be? And so I guess the notion again comes to that old saw of how has this person, this program, this department, this school moved the field. So what do I mean by that? Well, change thinking. Carol Greider was here yesterday. The discovery of the solution to the end of chromosome replication problem posed by Jim Watson years ago was telomerase. And that discovery, which she made in 5 papers, they made in 3 people, made in 5 papers, which were the first 5 papers of her CV, and the highest point of Carol's dazzling CV is these first 5 papers that changed thinking in a huge way. Changed practice, or that's the medical word, but you know what it means in your field. And so how did something change medical practice? A new drug, new management scheme, new preventive, et cetera. And then finally, you can change practice, you can change thinking, but did it have an outcome on the street? How has this contributed to products, jobs, companies, the economy, health in general? If we had a way of measuring those things, then I'd buy. If I stop.
This is always the fun part. Is that loud enough?
Mm-hmm.
Great. I actually really enjoyed the talk, and it gave me a lot to think about, because going through our APT process and sharing our APT reviews, we talk a lot about impact. And we use a number of the Thomson Reuters tools to look at those. But some of what's scary is use the phrase days to first citation. We could have an article sit in press for 12 months from the time it's accepted. So that means the next person to want to cite that article, their article could sit in press for 12 months. And that's after they got it submitted and accepted. So the like-to-like piece really appealed to me, that when we try to compare across disciplines, we don't need to know what the standards are in each, and even, as you said, within each discipline, within each subfield, and how fast those journals respond, and we can get things out. I also, much like Kurt, think we need to look a lot at other ways to measure impact, because the faculty can very easily tell us, here's my H factor, here's my citation count, here's how many articles I've got that are being cited, here's the ones that, maybe I shouldn't have done that one, because it didn't get cited, which might actually be better than negatively cited. So you've got to figure that one out. So, kind of looking at that, but also what's the real impact of it? So, did I write a paper that described a program evaluation, and now that program's being implemented in 15 locations? They happen to be small, not-for-profit agencies, so they're not publishing the fact that they're implementing it. But how do we get a grasp on that? How do we measure it? How do we include it? So those were my couple sentences.
Hi, Barb Smith from the School of Nursing. Nursing has arrived at research relatively a short time ago compared to medicine and some of the other basic science disciplines. We've primarily been an education and practice discipline, and really didn't pay a lot of attention to research until about 25, 30 years ago, when we started stomping for the National Institute for Nursing Research. It's still the smallest institute on the campus, and has a very small budget. But we're making inroads into a number of the other institutes. One of the things that struck me when you talked about the number of citations was, can you imagine being the person, the UK pediatrician who first published his work on the connection between vaccines and autism? So we always have those little glitches in the number of citations and that kind of thing. But you know, nursing right now, I would say that most of the leaders in nursing didn't really, or haven't really even today, recognized the importance of senior author, and that we're trying to change those kind of ways of thinking, and explain why senior author is extraordinarily important. And you know, some of the other things. So we're doing a lot of catching up in nursing, but we've kind of climbed the ladder slowly and surely. This past year, we were ranked 21st among schools of nursing. Again, it's so important. I mean, if we stack ourselves up against the School of Medicine, you know, we're dwarfed by the size of our income stream. But I can tell you that this past year, when we celebrated the ERA funding, we were second behind the School of a very distant second behind the School of Medicine in the receipt of ERA funds, but we got a decent chunk from the government. So we're making inroads. We're still very young and very naive, but beginning to look at some of the things we can do to evaluate our discipline. Impact factors in many of the nursing journals are pretty low, so we're trying to work on getting those up and more recognized. A lot of the faculty are trying to publish in other disciplines journal where the impact factor is higher, so that when they come up for promotion and tenure, those kinds of things can be weighed. That's my 2 cents.
Let's open this up to questions. Does anybody have any questions for any of our panelists? Starting with anybody that spoke today. Yes.
So thank you very much. It was a very insightful presentation. I want to pick up in part on what Kurt talked about and sort of reinforce that. I was mindful years ago, I chaired a promotion committee for the Jans, who were famous for developing the shaker gene, amongst other things. They were going for promotion to full professor, and they had only 16 publications between them. And it was the worst battle I've ever faced, and to get them promoted. How can you promote somebody with 16 papers? Well, each one opened a new field. And being mindful what Kurt has talked about, I think we tend to be over-focused on research dollars. First off, much less on the quality of an impact of the papers in terms of changing thinking and changing fields. And so I'm wondering, there's so many moving targets. The H-index, of course, it's the H-index whether you use yours or Google Scholar. Elsevier, when I was editor-in-chief of the journal for them, used to do a mock-up using their universe, which was very different than ISI's actually. How much self-citation you look at is a big issue as you talk about reviews, which get large numbers of citations very often versus point articles. Have you thought about, with your contacts and discussions, coming up with another metric that really attempts to normalize it in much different ways? As you say, compare like with like. Is there a way to sort of match a profile of investigator X? He's in field Y, he works in this area, he publishes in this area, that combines both publication rate, quality of the impact, maybe research funding from the most competitive institutes, NIH, NSF, and so on. Have you come up with that as a way to have a better sort of quantifier for judging performance for people to get promoted?
Well, this is why I'm still employed. we definitely talk about it. I mean, basically everyone in our staff is their former scientists. Every once in a while we joke that we're failed scientists, but we understand that there is this issue, and right now we have what's measurable. But what we also try to take into consideration is we always, even with all the custom evaluations that we do, we put forward those intangibles, because those are the things, as I said earlier to Dr. Sibin, it's that sparkle that they have, and there's no way right now to measure that sparkle, but that's the kind of information that we're trying to get at, and we're certainly not the only company that's trying to figure out how to do this, but it is, how do we have the measure of impact? I mean, we have impact factor, but then there are the issues with impact factor. I heard it from you, you have people publishing in different journals because they're concerned about that measure. If they think they're going to be measured against that, they're going to go after that target. So yeah, so we still have work to do. So we're definitely thinking about it and looking at ways to overlay it, but we don't have the magic bullet right now. But that's one of the biggest drivers of all the different categories that we collect in research and review, and another product that we've done for NIH, which is the electronic scientific portfolio analysis tool. It's trying to combine all these things, and then you have to figure out how you slice it and dice it and what's going to be important to you, because there are those intangibles. I mean, I've got plenty of them on my CV, so.
The one thing that I was thinking about too was how do you capture the kind of some of the very rare but important prizes that are awarded to a university. I was at, before I came to Maryland, I was at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And I remember when the first Rhodes Scholar scholarship was awarded to a young engineer at the Huntsville school or university branch of Alabama, and how that was such a big deal. Or some schools, if they're fortunate enough to have Nobel laureates, and that. So how do you bring those prizes into the equation?
Well, and there is that cachet of having that, and it's something that we collect, and actually one of the evaluations that I'm working on right now that's a custom, it's looking at, are they getting special prizes, are they serving on, like I used to staff a federal advisory committee, are they being invited, because that is prestige. And again, no measure for prestige, unfortunately, but you have to know it's there, and my job as the evaluator is to say, this is something that's really prestigious, and within your field, like we look to you, the expert, to say, this is prestigious in my field, this is something that it's worth counting, and you just have to push for that indicator. It doesn't have a number attached to it, but you have to say, this is something that I consider the best of the best in my field, and it may not equal those publications. It's one of those things that I definitely understand the importance of Pew Scholars, or for in the DC area, we're gonna say, have you been picked on certain different, and we even categorize, a review panel versus reporting to the HHS secretary, because it's different level of high, some are high profiles, others are, you get boxes of grants. So, how do we gauge those?
I have a question back here.
I'm glad you opened the door for me. And I think Kurt might be a little worrisome that I'm standing up here. I want to take off from this discussion today, the status today, what we think about today. When you reach my age, and I'm probably the oldest faculty member on this campus, when you reach my age, you sort of ponder what's happening today and what happened yesteryear and what went on in previous generations of research. Think of this. Look at the NIH edict for support of research grants. To fund the best science by the best scientists, not to fund the best researchers, by the best researchers. There's a distinction between a researcher and a scientist. And that distinction has been lost in the contemporary generation. The reason I make this statement now is because I looked around while the presentation was going on, and I saw the attentiveness of all the young people. I'm not speaking to the old guys. And if you think that you are being trained as a scientist, the chances are most likely you are not. You are being trained or have been trained as a super technologist and perhaps in addition a researcher. So what we have to get around to is before my passing, which will be the end of the generation that has the philosophy that's existed in the past. Before that ends, you are the next generation that can save us, that can save us from our shortfalls in what we are supposed to be doing in medicine, in nursing. By the way, I used to run the department that presented the physiology course for the School of Nursing. And hopefully you demand that you are trained and your next generation will be trained as scientists, not as researchers. Now, if you don't know the distinction between the two, I don't want to take up the time to do that. Go to PubMed, look up my name, in academic medicine publications, and you'll find two that describe precisely what we are talking about. And the older generation folks understand this, and the younger generation folks do not. That's where we have to bring this country, and even internationally, back into the quality of science and the quality of scientists as being our aim and purpose.
What is your name? What is your name?
Costello. You don't know me? I'm infamous around here.
Yes.
I hope you get those citations for fame, not notoriety.
I thought it was very interesting, and I appreciate your talk. I serve on a lot of peer review committees. I have many years on faculty affairs and graduate council and do peer reviews. I also work, I guess I should, whatever, disclose. I work 25% time for NCI, so I'm also on that side of things. So I see a lot of this. And I guess one of my issues, and you dealt with it a little bit, is the schizophrenic nature of what we're doing and our mission. So here's a public institution. We are training a lot of health professionals. That's a major goal, and we do, I think, a phenomenal job here. We have clinical responsibilities, people with a lot, and we hire people because they're excellent in these two areas. And then we have I think, amazing research program given the strengths of it. But we hire people in these different areas, and then we judge them all on the same metrics. And so one of my issues is how, it's nice to count metrics, but how do we level the playing field so that we actually can judge people on the jobs that we've hired them or expect them to do, is one, in a fair way, across the different types of jobs people will have in an academic research institution like this. And the other one is even kind of more is, all your metrics, one of the things I see missing, and I see this all the time, is you don't count second rank. So when you look at all these, it's like, well, you might be getting grants, small grants, but who are you competing with? So in other words, is it better to lose 6 grants to Harvard than to have gotten 2 small grants in an institution that no one's competing? So even just, it's not just the money, but it's the kind of what sphere you're working in and how competitive it is. It's, I think, quite an important metric that is not measured.
Well, and that's something that we do, and yeah, it was missing from the slides. We do try to add environment, and some of the customs that we do, it's, what was the environment at the beginning? We're looking at NCI's K Award program, What was the environment during the doubling period, and what is it now? I mean, you have to say it's drastically different, and we do try to factor in that environment as well. But you're exactly right. We can't we would love to stick numbers on everything, but that's where you really have to, that question of what is the program trying to evaluate, and what do you want to get out of it? That's when you factor in those less measurable attributes, because we know they're there and they're important.
I'd like to ask Dr. Costello, way back when I was doing my philosophy of science course, and that the one factor that just blew me away was the fact that almost all the really important discoveries over the last several centuries have been made by newcomers to the field, not the old timers, not the people that had been slaving in the trenches, but newcomers to the field because they were thinking a little differently. And how do you identify those scientists early in their careers and support them? Because a lot of things was, oh, you know, they're just an assistant professor, or, you know, they only have 16 publications, and that kind of thing. So, you know, early in my career, I worked for Fred Robbins at the Institute of Medicine. And one day I was sitting at lunch with him, and I said, you know, you won the Nobel Prize at the age of 27. What do you do for an encore? You know, and here's this guy who had probably at that time as many gray hairs as you do, and as I probably do. But you know, at 27, he won the Nobel Prize, and it's those young scientists that are struggling in the trenches that sometimes don't get recognized, or they get kind of pushed down. That you know, how do you pick those out? How do you use some of these metrics maybe to evaluate them?
Well, and we have done some of those evaluations for grant programs that are specifically targeting things that aren't funded by NIH. And, you know, that's where having a cross-platform, you know, it's like we can compare the applications and the people who are applying and say, is this person that's new, or is this somebody who's trying to do something new? And I mean, again, it was, I think, one of my former employers, we're always asked if we have an innovation impact, or an innovation factor. And we don't, unfortunately, but when we have a great idea for it, I think a lot of people are looking for it, because you're exactly right. I mean, most of these big discoveries are made by graduate students, early career. They have everything to gain, you know, and very little to lose. You know, it's like they can take that risk, and you know, we don't have metrics for it, and that's where you will never be able to just evaluate, or at least in my opinion, only. You know, you can't just evaluate people based on the numbers. You kind of have to look at the whole package, and it's that research black box. You know what it is, but sometimes you just can't put a number to it, and we never want to lose sight of that. I mean, we can take all these factors, and all these indicators, but there is that personal touch and feel as well that you need to add to it.
Yeah, I have a question. How do you decide what journals or publication types to include in your citation reports? Because obviously when you run a report, you only get the citations of those journals or vehicles that you track. And I'm especially talking about the new electronic media. I mean, I know obviously some of those journals you do pick up, but there may be other types of electronic publishing that are not being measured for impacts through your service or other services.
Well, and we are, with ScienceWire, we are limited to Web of Science, which has precise rules for being included in Web of Science journals. But yes, this is another thing that we have to factor, is a changing field of publishing, you know, the electronic journals, and this varies field to field, and this is a very field-specific thing, whereas like in engineering, they tend to publish conference papers and proceedings. You have to look at the environment, just all those, that slide with all the inputs, outputs, and all the little boxes. We have to look at the whole picture and decide, and we work with the client and say, what's the best picture of your field, and you know, make sure that we're comparing like to like as much as possible. It's not the definitive answer you were hoping for, but.
Well, I was just going to say, I can remember 6 years ago, I went with a group, I was the president of the Medical Library Association at the time, and I went with a group of nursing researchers from the Inane group, which is an unfortunate name for that group of individuals, but they're called Inane. And we took the train up to ISI at the time, Thomson Reuters was just entering the picture in Philadelphia, to ask them to include more nursing research journals in the Web of Science piece. And so, you know, if there are journals that aren't being added, you know, certainly there's as you say, there's a methodology for their inclusion, but I you know, based on a lot of things I'm hearing, there's a lot of things that you can't capture in the ISI Web of Science. I mean, if you hear people like Adam Bly speak from SEED, he talks about a lot of the information that's being shared and discovered that's appearing only in, not even in electronic journals, but on the web, in blogs, and where important things are happening in an area that we're not even capturing in any way, shape, or form. So,
well, and that's one of the things, I mean, that's actually one of the publication types of research review, because we do know that, you know, we're factoring in, apparently lawyers love to do online publishing. Imagine that. So, you know, and looking at these different modes of communication, because it is communication, and communication is getting your idea out there. But yeah, we are kind of shackled for some of our analyses and some of the numbers to what we've classified in Web of Science, and you know, we have to move with it. So you know, it's a good thing for us to think about. You know, how are we going to provide a metric to it, or do we? You know, and how do we score these things? Is there a score? Is there a way to measure?
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna add that, although I'm very attached to Web of Science, there are other things you can use, and if you stay for the class, you'll probably know. One of them is called Publisher Parish, which is an open website that bases citation analysis on Google Scholar. And it's just another, not better, not worse, but another way to look at some numbers, and it pulls in some more of those, you know, it's less authoritative than Web of Science or Scopus, but it pulls in some things that are a little bit mushier from the web. And so it might be something to look at. If you just Google Publisher Parish, you'll find it. Yes.
No, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. It was really wonderful to see, you know, the science behind the tools. You know, I do use Web of Science on a regular basis, and to know how this thinking goes beyond the picture. I had a couple of questions. The first one, you know, you've existed for a long time, right? Thomson Scientific, Reuters, and these tools, and you mentioned that you can predict based on all these data some future trends. You know, what's the next hot things? Have you been able, in your experience with that, to actually correctly predict area of interest?
Well, you know, they do try to do the thing that is the funniest thing that I guess Thomson does, and I don't specifically work in that area, so I don't want to go too far beyond it. But every year they try to predict the Nobel laureates, and they've actually had some pretty good success looking at and using, and I don't recall all the specific metrics, but that's the thing that gets a lot of press. You know, it's usually the week leading up to the announcements, and then, you know, were we right? And this year we were pretty good, you know. But then I remember sitting, you know, at meetings at Cold Spring Harbor, and you know, with usually a glass of wine, and making predictions ourselves, and we were pretty good too. So you know, you can put the metrics to it, or you can do the personal evaluation, and you kind of know what was game changing. And but I haven't done that work specifically, no.
And the second question was, have you, in your analysis, ever included a parameter that's looked at where these scientists originated? Was it in a small liberal college or no small? Because that would be, you know, an interesting point in where the emphasis of generating this, you know, new generation of scientists. Yes, you know, we hear about the research when they're at Harvard, but where were they nurtured when they were young scientists? And I think a lot about this because I am going into academics, and I have to make the right choice to have, you know, that interaction and that mentorship that's so essential. And there is no factor for mentorship. I don't know how you
We have looked at that. A lot of times we are looking more at where people are getting their terminal degree, so their medical degree, what type of, or their PhD, using the Department of Education iPads, or the Carnegie classifications, and the type of atmosphere that they're coming from. We've done some work looking at undergraduate, but yeah, it's, you know, I come from a teeny tiny liberal arts college where you're able to sit and think and be creative. You know, does that give me a leg up, or should I have been in a research one institution right off the bat to have success? I think that's a great point, and we are looking at some of those in some of our evaluations.
So, question for you, Kurt, since you represent the School of Medicine here, and I'm going to pick up on a point that Dr. Faden made before. No one disputes how useful these metrics are, and I thought you did a great presentation of that. No one disputes that, but I guess here's my question for you. Is there an over-reliance on metrics at this point? And let me give you just the downside to this. I know a lot of people here, for those whom I don't know, our office works with junior faculty in a variety of capacities. And with this extraordinary reliance on metrics, which I think all of us agree is what's happening right now,
And it's happening at a time when, as we all know, funding has become much more difficult. And I feel like the metrics hasn't kept pace with the reality of what we know is going on at the NIH. So my question to you is, our experience, one of the probably most surprising and most dispiriting aspects of my own work here is that over the last 6 months, the number of ethics cases that have come into my office is huge. And I don't deal with ethics, you need to understand, that's not my job. But I do deal with junior faculty, and because we're the front line for junior faculty, that is where the cases come first in School of Medicine. The number of ethics issues has risen exponentially. Do you think that there is any type of relationship between this unbelievable emphasis on metrics, which have not changed to take account for the changing funding climate and this extraordinary increase in ethical problems? Kurt.
So Wendy's kindly setting me up here for
Pretty
a
much,
slam
Kurt.
because that's where I'm going to come and where she sits on this issue. That wonderful quote from, was it Goodhart? That if there's a system, it's going to be manipulated. We had a bioengineer come to talk, and he was in his 40s, and he had 500 papers, and we kind of laughed at everything. And then later on in his visit, we were talking about rankings, and we were mentioning this ISI ranking, where the University System of Maryland came out 11th on the list, if I counted right. And we were saying, hey, that's good. But we immediately all looked at it and said, well, where do our schools come out? Where does this? And he said, yeah, in his department of engineering at Rice, in their School of Engineering, every department on their website had some category in which they were number one. So, you can play these games a lot, and I guess another story is this issue came up in a recent discussion where Harold Promise was leading the discussion, and poor Harold, nobody ever cites him for the oncogene anymore, nor does anybody cite anybody else. So, it's part of the wallpaper, and how do you value that and everything. But he was saying, everybody gives me all these metrics and numbers, and I always come back to them, and I ask her, where's the spark question of what did this person do, and what did it mean, and what was the impact on it. I want to switch though to a different area, because we could spend all our lives, and we do, evaluating each other and worrying about promotions and grants and stuff like that. But there's a very big picture that maybe Yvette could tell us a little bit, called STAR metrics, and the issue of how the NIH is proposing, or is thinking of proposing, or is moving to propose to justify its budget. And that is nowhere more clear than in the past week and weekend and everything. And the fact that the NIH budget is going to stay almost the same this year, we're really happy, but we wonder what happens next month, next year, and everything. And what do we do for the public? We write a piece with stimulating words in it. We give a couple of examples, and we give some stats. We find some stats that are good for us. I mean, that's what we do as a medical science body to try to justify the NIH budget or other science budgets, not just NIH. And so the search is on, because now it's not just the Republicans, but a liberal Democratic president who's calling for metrics. And they all want numbers. How are we going to give them numbers? And there are these proposals out of STAR metrics that are developing. I wonder if you can educate us a little on this.
Oh man, you put me on the spot. No, we are working with NIH on STAR metrics. It's not my area of expertise, so. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, there is this push from the administration to use metrics, and NIH, because we've developed the ESPA, the Electronic Scientific Portfolio Assistant for them, they're trying to use that information that we've helped slice and dice, and how do we make this a reasonable metric, and that's about the extent that I can, but we're definitely working with them on making sure it's a reasonable assessment of science, because we don't want it to be reactionary, and we certainly don't, it's an interesting perspective, chasing impact, chasing those things just to make yourself look better, and then you get all these ethics cases against you, and then you become radioactive, what have you done to your career, so.
Or should an institution do it? And I meant to come back and hit that point. It's tragic when an individual does it, but what about when an institution does it? Or what about when we as a community of science oversell, I work on stem cells, oversell stem cells? There are going to be consequences to things like that, but we have to sell. And where's the line? And what's a reasonable metric? And how manipulated can they be? There are scientific principles that we can use on some of this, and some of the questions you're asking, there's always the question of, okay, that line, what does it mean?
Well, and that's why it's so important. I mean, when I decided to leave the bench, everyone's like, oh, you just threw everything in the toilet, and really you need scientists doing these evaluations, because we understand that black box, and no, I don't do this. My wrist is very happy that I don't pipette anymore, but it's one of those things that you need to make sure that the staff is, you're essentially the peers. I mean, we have to keep up as much on the science and be able to say, no, there isn't a metric for this, but this is what we know, this is the field, that's, I think, one of the things that we're always trying to stress, even when we do evaluations. A lot of times they look at, well, have we produced these people that are going after R01s? Well, there are other things that you can do with your science background too, and that they're no less worthy than getting that R01 and being a bench researcher, because we've produced a ton of PhDs, and there aren't enough academic positions for them. So, we always are trying to do that intangible and balance it. But yeah, there is a push from the government for metrics.
And if we can link from grants and papers to some sort of outcomes, that's going to be really important. And
Exactly.
if those are good links, if those are really predictive links that we
Yep.
can test with hypotheses.
Yep.
May I add this is brief
Please.
comment? I'm glad you raised that issue. Because it's fundamental to what I refer to as being trained as a scientist. Everybody in this room should be required to read some of the old studies and old philosophies. And one of them is very simple. One of them is dedication to science means the following. You conduct an experiment. You have an idea. You conduct an experiment. You conduct the experiment according to the scientific method, properly. And then the word comes out. Nature has spoken, the result of the experiment. And once nature has spoken, personal biases must disappear. Now, when you have that kind of understanding of science and the responsibility of the scientist, most of these issues of bioethics disappear from the scene. But you see, we haven't trained recent generations of researchers to think along the lines of not only how you conduct science, but what the responsibilities of the scientist is once the conduct of the experiment is over with. You have to read Claude Bernard. Claude Bernard is the father of modern physiology and the father of modern medicine. He set the stage for medicine, meaning of health sciences, for medicine becoming a scientific endeavor rather than an empirical endeavor.
I guess kind of thinking, at least from social work and perhaps some of the other fields, the metrics are wonderful. We use them, they're part of the picture, but not everything is going to be eligible for NIH so if we continue to put too much emphasis on the amount of grant money that comes out of something or comes into something, we're going to shortchange some really good intervention research that gets funded through foundations or that doesn't cost a lot of money to do, so that we can actually fund it in-house. And so I think that's an important part of the equation, is that we don't just look at a particular funding stream as being the only one that's appropriate. And the comment about ethics, I think, coming from a doctoral program perspective, we put a lot of energy into training our new scientists, and we hope that when we graduate them, they go into nurturing environments. By the same token, when we hire junior faculty, we've made a big investment in hiring them, and I hope we're providing them with an environment that doesn't put so much emphasis on getting an R01 or publishing in the premier journal that we basically suffocate them before they make it through their third-year contract renewal.
One of the metrics that I found really interesting, I worked on this evaluation with the Center for Excellence in Research and Therapeutic Research program, and we did something called network analysis, and what it showed was really an impact in your field, because it showed like it was like a spider web and multiple, so for example, one program had huge impact and was collaborating with many groups, and so their webs were like starbursts all over. And then one other group which had great metrics, i.e. they were publishing a hell of a lot per dollar, like almost extraordinary amount of publications, kind of off the charts. They had almost circular, just a very small, and so you could see that yes, maybe in one area that you're counting, they looked really good. But when you actually looked at the impact of the field and how their work was being translated and applied, it was very small.
And those are actually some of the slides I left off. I mean, the network analysis is really, really cool, and you can see the shift too as you have certain grants or certain programs, and the shift of who they collaborate with, and they're pretty awesome. And that's exactly what we see a lot of the time is the best metrics. They're very isolated because they've focused on publishing that way, but if they're more collaborative, sometimes they have to reach out to journals that may not have the most fantastic impact factor.
Or they go international. And so you see a splash here, but then you see a trickle down that keeps going. And I think that's a really nice way to augment what we're doing, is to look at that also.
I wonder if, in the spirit of what Les was suggesting, and I take that as really think about this, in one way, the ISI Thomson Reuters has done an omic experiment, unbiased. Just collect everything, maybe not everything, but take all the bias points out, take all the impact factors off, collect it all. Make some sort of hypothesis for what you want. I mean, if you want you're looking for an engineer and you're trying to use your tools for which engineer to hire. Put some bias points on them. Write down what those bias points are, let X equal this, let Y equal this. See who you come out with. Get a different committee to pick up a different bunch of bias factors. See what you come out with. Maybe compare that to who is hired based on a totally subjective sort of system, and do some experiments with these metrics. I'd like to say before we use them, but maybe it's going to be as we use them. It would be fun to do that and to test uses of tools rather than try uses of tools as we go.
Any other comments, questions, anything from the panel?
Question.
Yes, please.
Has anyone tried to develop, something I've never seen, a tool that measures mentoring in any fashion? The output of students once trained or faculty once trained, and what their impact has been on the field. Because I know folks who we have never had established reputations as high as you might like, who have trained and influenced an enormous number of individuals who have been influential.
And that's actually, I love it. You set me up to talk about my favorite thing, Research and View. We do collect it, and we do have for each, and it's based on Ohio State's pro collection system, so we're partners in developing it. But they have put a lot of emphasis on the mentoring, and so there is a lot of information that we collect, and we do collect certain items of, you know, noteworthy accomplishments. Now, it's hard to make something that we hope would be an international product and make all the selections possible, but, you know, there are other things. Did they present at a national or international conference, or, you know, have they gotten a faculty position? So we do collect those sort of items, but again, it's either you have it or you don't as mode of collection. There's no like numbers or actual hardcore metrics to it. But it is something that's very important to collect, and that was actually the fun part of working on a data model. It's like all the stuff that goes into that university experience, you know, how does that impact how you are when you get out, when you get that degree, and what you decide to do. And so we try to make sure that we collect all of those things, because yeah, we have a few things that we can measure, but there's so much more to that university experience.
But, you know, couldn't they use something like you know, when you apply for a T32, you have to put in there, you know, who you've mentored and what their current position is and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we parse that information out of federal grants as well. I mean, you get credit for the training grant, you get credit for the mentoring, and you know, there's lots of ways to slice it and dice it and record the information.
As you're aware, this has been proposed as an additional criteria for priority scoring of grants, is the mentoring training that the grants are provided in addition to the discovery part.
Anybody else? Well, first of all, thank you to our very entertaining, engaging, and knowledgeable panel. So let's give them another round of applause.